whether we like it or not, mental health is associated with financial. The value of money is not separate from your traumatic experiences. It's part of that. When you have your whole identity on money, you gain anxiety because you know the day I lose this money, I lose my identity.
How do you practice happiness outside of whatever figures it is that you've said?
Contentment. Your brain learns from simplicity before it encompasses complexity. So that if you want to make 15 million, it's going to start with, okay, today, what have you done with the 1,000? What does money mean to you? Most people will say freedom. Like if I came and gave you freedom, but your mind has not conceptualized the value of freedom itself, you'll most probably misuse it. In 2024, there was an increase of male ages of 35 and 45. There was a 35% increase in suicidality.
35%.
35% last year. And the leading factor, financial constraints.
Hey guys, welcome back to Financially Incorrect. I am your host, Barak, as usual. And of course, as you know, this podcast is proudly sponsored by none other than FXpesa. And today we actually have a message for all of you guys who watch from Uganda. Of course, you know FXpesa is already in Uganda. They have a physical presence there. And yes, we do want to bring you more content that's relevant for you guys. So in the next this is Collins, the marketing manager at FXpesa. In the next 2-3 months, we need to come to Uganda. We've been to Tanzania. We went to Tanzania last year. We are going to come back to Uganda and we are going to interview a couple of people from Uganda. We do have a few names that were recommended to us via, I think, Carol's episode and on Twitter. We'll try and get as many people as we can so that we can give you financial stories that are relevant for you guys. But in the meantime, please ensure that you do go check out FXpesa. Their offices in Uganda are on Rumi building. The offices in Uganda are on Ruby or Rumi? Rumi. Okay. The offices in Uganda are in Rumi building, so please be sure to check them out. Otherwise, you can check out all the online links in the description box below, and you can learn all you need to know about trading and get access to the global financial markets via FXpesa, the perfect partner for you. Today, we have an interesting sort of different conversation. It's not the typical Financially Incorrect episode. It's sort of similar to the episode where I interviewed Gishuki Kahome, where we didn't necessarily speak to him about his financial journey, but we talked about finance and was able to offer quite a bit of insight. So today we have a similar sort of kind of episode, and we're going to be talking about, I guess, the psychology of money, and not in the way that it's been written in the book. The book is called Psychology of Money, right? Yeah, not in the way that it is in the book that's been published by, that's been read all over the world, but in a sort of different way and from a sort of Kenyan and possibly East African context. So with me today, I have none other than Nyambura Gathumbi, who is a therapist in Kenya. And she was actually at our Love and Money event and featured, I think, really prominently and added a lot of value to anybody who came for that show. Welcome to Financially Incorrect.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah. Really excited to impact psychologically so that people understand how your psychology influences your financial overall worldview.
Especially in this difficult, this country of ours. Let's just leave it there. Okay, before I even ask you the questions that we have set for that, what's it like being a therapist in Kenya? How lucrative is it to be a therapist in Kenya? And especially because you guys aren't ethically allowed to advertise. Yeah.
It's interesting. We have seen the spike of mental health services go up post-COVID-19. So post-2020, there's been a spike in terms of the need for professionally trained therapists or psychologists. So we are just seeing psychology in the infancy stages in Kenya, which is really exciting. But then on the other hand, the services are not cheap. I mean, you're looking at an individual session that goes between 30 and 35 USD per hour. And that's not everyone who can afford that. So it's a good time to be a therapist, but it's also a strenuous time economically because not everybody can afford your services. And I guess that's why it's so paramount that you guys are doing such a work, because you're also impacting psychologically and financially positively for people who can't come into therapy.
Yeah. Okay. I guess let's get into it, right? So my objective for this episode is for anybody who's watching, listening, to be able to hopefully understand themselves better, and that their psychology a little better, and their mindsets, and where they are, and how they view money, and why they appreciate money the way that they do. That's my hope. So hopefully the questions that I have will allow for that to be unpacked. And today I do have my questions on my phone. There's a guy who commented on the episode with Carol, who was like, this guy needs to have, like, put his questions together so that he doesn't forget. So I forgot this anyway. So I have some questions today because we're doing it differently.
Sure.
I wanted to make sure I have everything. So if you do see me looking at my phone, which is I don't usually do, that's what I have. So to start off, right? As I guess, I think many, is it pastors who say, especially during funerals, that we come into this world with nothing, right? That we're born literally without any clothes on our back, naked, empty. So what is when a person is born, what's their intrinsic value system, right? What are the things? How do they what do they value at that point, and how do they begin to value money as their measure of value? Like where does that happen in between between a person's being born and their consciousness of understanding money is a value, is an object that is used to determine my value in one way or another?
Okay.
Yeah.
So when a child is born, and just for being objective, let's look at between the ages of 0 to 3 and then 3 to 10. And the reason why I use that is because this is a time when the brain creates blueprints of everything, including money. So the child in and of itself has no perception or understanding of value. The child borrows the understanding and perception of value, everything, money, self, religion, food even, from the external. So ideally you can observe an individual inherits their money value systems from the environment that they are growing up to. And that becomes the blueprint. If it is not engineered after, that becomes a blueprint of how they actually view money. So that if you have a child who's coming from an environment where the communication for money is that it's scarce, the child learns that money is scarce. But this is the unfortunate thing, because you're using the same blueprint. The scarcity it doesn't just stop at money, it stops at everything else. Even time is scarce, even food is scarce, even relationships are scarce. So this is what leads the individual to literally just want to hoard and to hold everything, because you don't ever know when that's going to come, when something like that is going to come. So we inherit our money value systems from our environment, from home, from school, from religion, from friendships, from relationships. We inherit that.
And that's up to, I guess, from age 0 to age 10.
Yes, age 0 to age 10.
So, I mean, and maybe if I'm to try and see if I can narrow that a bit more, at what point would you say a child is now consciously understanding what money is or what a value system is vis-a-vis subconsciously just viewing it?
Yeah. That's when they unconsciously or subconsciously ask for something and that is met. Money is not an object of concern. So like if you have a 5-year-old who says, Daddy, buy me the car, and you buy them. For them, money is just anything else. It's like air. It's there to be used. But when the child asks for something, and because of how we grow up, and there's a limitation onto that, then they become aware of, so this thing has an end. And if that is continually ingrained without proper communication, like, listen, today there is no money, but tomorrow there'll be money for 1, 2, 3. When the emotional need is not met, then there's a conscious awareness that there's something different about this thing that we call money. And they carry into it. And I need to mention this, that below the ages of 10, there's a phenomena that happens to children. It's called egocentrism. So egocentrism is when the child attributes everything as their fault. I don't know if you've been around children, like when they hit the chair, they don't say the chair, I hit the chair. They say the chair hit me. Because the child is at the center of their own world. The brain, the capacity of the brain is not fully developed for them to understand there's another world. and for them to understand abstractness. So everything that happens in the child's world, the child knows it's because of me. And so if there's scarcity in the family, it's because of me. Daddy doesn't have money because of me. Maybe I did this to him. Maybe I didn't do that to him. I mean, if I was a good child, daddy would buy me what I want. And that's why we need to have conversations with children about money very early on.
Is there a way to curb that in any way? And the reason why I'm asking that is like I see, I don't think I did it. I'm in a blended family, and by the time I was meeting my kids, I think they were a bit beyond. But I've seen people do like you hit the chair, like it's a bad chair, or it's like a bad shoe, or you know what I mean, like to appease the child,
right?
Like this object or this thing is bad.
Yeah.
Does that further or encourage that egocentrism thinking, or it doesn't really matter?
No, it actually validates their emotions. It's called attunement. Because you see, for a child below the ages of 10, if this cup has caused them hurt, the child's mind is black and white. This is a bad cup, and this bad cup has caused me hurt. So when you emotionally comfort them, you're telling them it's okay to be angry. And when you're angry, when you're comforted, the pain goes away. So it's a good thing to emotionally meet their needs at that level.
Okay. So we sort of understood how, well, to some extent, understood how the value system is then picked up. At what point do we, or does one get to the point where they then begin to measure themselves against the amount of money they have, or the amount of money their family has, or sort of what's that process like? What happens there?
That's the school-going age. And that is between the ages of 7 to 8. An interesting thing happens is that innocence has waded off because the brain has developed, and the brain is in a part or a process where it then can understand abstractness of time, abstractness of others. So that when before the child goes to school, their full social interaction is with the family. And they don't have anything to compare it to. So the family is great. There's nothing as marvelous as a family. That's why when you find children playing, they're going to say, oh, my daddy is the best, my mommy is the best. Because to them, their family is everything. Then when they go to school, at the time when they go to school, which should be 7 years, because there's a part of the brain that develops at the age of 7 that is able to help them first concentrate at least between 15 to 30 minutes without interruption and understand what is being taught. When they go to school, they then start to see, that one has a different shoe than mine. And remember, egocentrism is like, how comes I don't have the shoes? So that awakening invites comparison. And that's where the abstractness of money comes crumbling down. It's like, wait a minute, my friend Steve is being dropped, but us, we are walking home. So how comes they are being dropped and we are walking home? So it's when they enter the education system, that's when the comparison starts to come into place. Now the home has to be the place where this child can actually come and explore their thoughts and ask, mommy or daddy, how comes Steve is being dropped and I'm walking home? What's going there? And the parents have to have an authentic conversation. It's like, well, they seem to have more money than we do, which is okay, because everywhere in the world, somebody will always have more money than you, right? And I guess we'll talk about, we'll talk about the identity of money much later.
Right.
But the home has to be the environment where this child learns how to explore, because again, they internalize. They start to think, our family isn't as good as I thought it would be. And then the brain starts to form blueprints of false belief systems of, if we had more money, we would be better than. More money doesn't always necessarily mean you're better than. Certainly will improve the quality of life, and you do need to have some level of money to improve your quality of life. But we want to foster an environment where this child's identity is separate from the money identity.
And how do you do that? Because, I mean, I would say, at least the society I live in, is based like money is a big deal. It's a big value
Yeah.
indicator of someone's ability and how we value people in this world, right? So how do you begin to value yourself out of a money conversation?
Yeah.
And maybe even before you answer that, the question would be, so up until this age 10, 12, 13, whatever age it is, what is the value system that kids have? Like, what are the things that measures what they value? Up until that point, what measures what they value?
Family. The one, presence of the parents. And I'm very intentional in saying presence. If the parents are present, and I'm not talking about perfect, I'm talking about present. If the child sees the parent and they see that they can access the emotions of the parents, not what are you feeling, it's the way the parents are relating with the child, they start to value themselves based on how their parents see them. And that's so important for us to understand, because in psychology we say before a child has their own identity, before a child is I, a child is we. Because the child is seeing the world through the eyes of the caregiver. So their value system is based on how their caregiver sees them and their friends, based on the acceptance of their friends. So all these are social. And of course, other things like extended family members and religion and spirituality. But at the core of it is, how are my parents seeing me? And how the child evaluates that is, how are my parents relating with me?
So at that age, basically, a child is as valuable as a parent allows them to be.
Access them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So I guess now with interaction with other kids and going to school, the value system begins to shift.
Yeah.
And what needs to happen ideally in a child's life to ensure that their value system doesn't get corrupted like mine or those of ours and becomes money related?
So first of all, and let's be realistic, their value system will be corrupted because it's just the world that we live in. Perhaps maybe we should be asking, how do we reduce the corruption even more? Is by having a home environment that is authentic and vulnerable. And we don't know how to do this as African parents. I'm just learning. My son is 20 years. I'm just learning how to do this now as a mom. Is to have the child bring in all their emotions, all their all their disconnections, and to address that openly and honestly. Practically, how that would look like is, Mom, Dad, how comes Steve's dad have more money? It's like, well, we don't know. We are trying our best. I'm sorry that you feel that, their life is better. And maybe their life is better. It doesn't mean that your life is less. It just means at this particular point where daddy and mommy, or in situations where there's a single parent, this is the best we can give you at this particular time, but we are really, really trying our best. So we have to cultivate an environment where these children bring in the confusion that they have. Because you have to be a sounding board. You want to be a sounding board for your children. Because, think about even your own life. The belief systems that were pegged coming maybe even into early adulthood were all from places that seemed better than where you were coming from. So you adapted that belief system that seemed, it was foreign, but it seemed better than where you were coming from. And you couldn't bounce that off maybe with the parents, because either the parents were too occupied or they were just not there. Yeah. So the home is such an integral part in teaching everything about money, about identity, about self. Okay. The home is such an integral part.
Okay. So, I want to give a practical situation, right? So, depending on the car one drives, for example, whether it's driving into a mall, into an office, if you're driving in with, I guess, what may be perceived as an Uber car vis-a-vis driving into the Mercedes, even the watchman will treat you different, right? The way that they'll open the gate for you, or the questions that they'll ask, or how aggressive they'll be with you, is different.
Yeah.
Are you able to, because my perception is that it is based on, this guy has this amount of money and this guy has the X amount of money.
Yeah.
Like, what's the thinking around that? What's the psychology around that kind of appreciation?
It's aspiration. We are aspirations as human beings. We are aspirational because, and this now flows into something else of happiness. we tend to cap our happiness with a destination. We tend to think that if I had X amount of money, I would be happy. The reality is that's partly true, not completely true. Like if you had extra amount of money, it would certainly weigh off a certain anxiety that you're carrying. So the reality is it's there. Aspiration is if I relate with somebody who is rich, they might help me in this problem that I have. So even for the watchman or the gateman, if I say, Jambo, Madam Nini Nini, and he smiles with me, maybe when I'm driving out, he has the courage to, Najua Madam Leos Jakula, and you can easily give him whatever that you have, whatever little or much that you have. Is that the wrong thing to be? I don't know. The reality is we are aspirational human beings. Now, when you find yourself in a position of influence where you have financial power, it's good to intentionally try and treat everybody differently. But also, let's be honest, super wealthy people already have an expectation to be treated in a specific way. So we treat them the way they want. What we don't want to do is to have somebody feel less than because they have less than. Yeah.
But I mean, but how do you achieve how do you achieve that? And I guess the reason I'm asking that is because it sounds very idealistic.
It is idealistic.
Yeah, but how do you achieve that in reality? How do you treat the billionaire the same way you're treating, I guess, someone who's not as privileged and is walking? How do you...
It's by being intentional. It's actually by placing the value of a human being on the value of a human being. Respect, empathy, compassion, those don't take money. So I have to be intentional about, this is maybe like a house manager or even somebody who picks, in Kenya we call them chokorama people, you know. Seeing them, sasa, neza kununulia mkate or this and that. It's by being intentional. There is no where you can go to be taught, this is how you treat the less in the society and this is how you treat the more. The reality is it's very instinctive to want to give the person who's higher in terms of financial. It's very instinctive to want to give them your attention because you're aspiring to be part of their circle. Because if they're part of their circle, they can expose you to what they have. And if they expose you to what they have, you'll be a little bit happier. So we need to be more intentional about treating people with the human value, which is respect, compassion, gentleness, kindness. That doesn't take any money. Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, so then are you saying, or is it your, a proposal almost that I will treat people based on what I think I can get from them with relation to money. So if I see someone who I may aspire to be like, or someone who has more money than me, I may treat them with a lot more kindness or a lot more
higher respect.
Yeah, whatever the case is, purely because I'm like, if I can get into good spaces with this guy or this lady, then I'll be able to get X, X, and X. Vis-a-vis, if I'm meeting someone who I perceive to have less money than me and nothing that I need from him, then I'm more standoffish and a little bit more curt with how I would treat them and how I would relate to them.
But isn't that human behavior? That's how we behave.
And so I'm saying, so it's purely based on what I think I can get from this person.
Yes. It's the world we live in. Like basically, let's say you meet somebody. What's the next question you're going to ask them? Hi, what's your name? What's the next question you'll ask them?
What do you do?
Exactly.
Or who are you? Or
exactly.
When people don't ask you who are you, they ask you what do you do.
Exactly. How come?
So even in that introductory question, is I'm trying to evaluate where I place you in terms of what you can do for me in my life.
Yeah, because we were taught how to do that.
Yeah.
That's what we were taught.
Where do we get taught that?
In all the systems that we go through, even at home, in like the family system. Take maybe like 3 or 4 siblings. The most bright. Okay, so first of all, let's demarcate it. In terms of age.
Let me say this. I think I'm the brightest of all my siblings. I don't know if I'm sure they will defy this, but anyway.
Possibly. Yeah. Let's demarcate it with age. Okay, so guys, my age 40 and above. Yeah. Our siblings, the most brightest was the most favored. Because our parents felt, you see how good of a parent I am.
Yes. I've done well to
Produce
someone who can do X,
yeah.
X, and X, right?
And the child who wasn't the brightest was the mother's child. And that's the reality, really. You go to school, who's in my age, okay?
People rewarded.
Who are people rewarded? The brightest. They're the prefects. They're the ones who are given power. What are we learning throughout these systems? We're like, the guys who are the brightest, the guys who are at the top are the ones who are most loved. They're the ones who are most favored. Sisi ambao tuko huku chini, us who are down here, we want to aspire to be like them so that we can be most favored and so that we can be most loved. So you're going to get closer to them to see how they can help you to become most loved and most favored. That's the reality of the life and the world that we live in, is that the people who you want to connect with are people who you want to help you propel. Now, there's no shame in that, okay? Because that's how the world operates. That's why we say your net worth is your network is your net worth, right? So what you want to do is to be intentional. Even though somebody isn't as inspirational as you'd want them to be, when they're relating with you, when there's that connection, when you're talking, let's try to esteem them so that they feel that somebody respected me. And you know what? You could just save a life just by that conversation of, oh yeah, it's interesting that you do. Tell me more about what, even though it's not what you want, but just by listening to them and pointing out that it's still profound, even though it's not bringing that much amount of money to them right now. That encouragement could save a life.
Yeah.
So it's intentionality, really.
Okay. That's really interesting. I guess I've never consciously thought about it, and hopefully I can be more intentional. I was having this discussion with my wife last night about this conversation, and she has one of the best hearts I know.
Of course,
like,
you're going to say
no,
that, but I agree.
No, I genuinely think she's like a really good person, like salt of the earth. Not like me. I don't think I am. Like, I think my wife genuinely would treat whoever she sees.
That's beautiful.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
I unfortunately don't think I have the same thing. I think there's even people on this podcast who said I've been condescending and all of this and all of that, depending on who's sitting on their side of the seat.
Right.
And it's fine. But I guess now I'm trying to think about, okay, to be more intentional, because I had not subconsciously thought about the fact that I evaluate a relationship based on what I can get from it, right? And if I feel I can get something from it, then I will be a certain way. If I feel like I don't know,
evaluate and see,
then I'm not. So that's interesting. So the next thing I want to sort of ask you about is how do you value yourself? Because assuming you've then grown up in this society where a value system has been based on doing well, and reward system based on doing well from school, from home.
Yeah.
Then you get into the comparison space and you realize people who have more etc in the whole aspiration thing. So how does one then truly value themselves, and how do you know that you truly value yourself?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking this is because I want to ask, when you lose an income generating opportunity, whether it's a job, whether it's a business deal that's gone bad, whether it's a startup that's fallen apart, of course, because of the way we value ourselves, it's depressing. It's genuinely, it can send you, to the depths of depression completely, purely because the value system within which you value yourself is broken down. And now you are the totem pole, like you are at the bottom of whatever it is you're supposed to be. So I'm wondering, how do you truly value yourself that you don't set yourself up for that situation?
It's important to note that how we see ourselves and how we identify with ourselves, and subsequently how others identify us, is an effect of the overall systems that we come into place, right? Now, by the time you're coming into learning how to value yourself, you have to do the deconstruction and the reconstruction of your own identity. It's not a passive work. It's not an ambiguous work. It's not something that just happens. You just don't wake up in the morning and decide, oh, today I valued myself. You have to create a new identity. And you have to create a new identity on values. I value peace. I value respect. I value integrity. How do I then project those out so that people who I relate with can actually start to see, okay, this is a very peaceful person, or this is a very respectful person. There has to be a construction of an identity outside of money. And that has to be an ongoing construction of an identity. Because how we value ourselves, we learn. You're taught, the first question you ask somebody is, hi, what's your name and what do you do? Then you start to value themselves. The question, if somebody has lost a generative income, and to be honest, there's no demeaning or belittling how horrific, especially right now, or how horrific or how scary that is. To lose money right now is, honestly, it's akin to, you can literally go insane because things are really, really, really tough. Alongside the work that you're doing, strive to create an identity that is separate from the work that you're doing. In fact, that's why I think there was a study, I can't remember by who, that was showing the mortality rate of people after they resign. So you resign maybe at the age of 65. That paper, I'm so sorry, I can't remember who it was saying that most people don't survive post 5 years. Because it's now, who am I? I've been known to be this banker or this teacher or this or that. Who am I? As you're working and even as you're losing the income, please strive to construct an identity that is value-based. Money is important. Yes, it is overall important, but it doesn't have to be intrinsically important. Because what happens actually is when you have your whole identity on money, you gain anxiety because you know the day I lose this money, I lose my identity. So there's increased anxiety and you want to just keep getting and keep getting and keep getting. So for that bit, to avoid that kind of anxiety, construct an identity that is value-based. And you can Google values. Just go to Google or ChatGPT. Write down, okay, based on what I have written to you over the years, whatever, could you just give me a list of values that you think I possess? And ChatGPT will give you the values. And you pick one and live out that value every day. That's how you create an identity outside of money. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I want to ask something that maybe may clarify it a bit more. How do I know that my identity is based on money? And I'm asking that because, I mean, I don't know that there's anybody in the world who would just already put up their hand and say, yes, my identity is based on money. I'm a purely money value-based individual. I don't think I am. My identity is based on money. But when you're talking about anxiety and the thinking around what would happen if you lose your money, I'm beginning to wonder, okay, is it based on money? So I'm trying to evaluate for myself.
Yeah.
How do I know that my identity is based on the money that I make?
Actually wanted, it's interesting with that because that's a question that came up to mind. I even myself, I could ask myself, what would happen if the income that I gain as a therapist doesn't come? What then happens? And my mind goes into the next thing, which is I can do marketing. Okay, what happens if that doesn't come? My mind goes into, okay, I can learn something else that can bring me money. So the question maybe would be, if people didn't know you for what you do, how would you feel about yourself?
If people didn't know me for what I did, I don't know that it would matter much to me. But if I lost the income that I am making, I definitely do think that I would feel less of a person than I feel now, 100%.
But so that's the thing. That's normal.
Yeah.
It's normal for you to feel less than, especially as a man, because DNA is embodied around provision, protection, and all those things. So it's normal to feel like, my gosh, if I lost my income, it means your wife, she's destabilized, which means the family is a little bit destabilized. It's expected for you to feel less than.
So what's a healthy amount of...
When you feel like your world will totally shut down. When you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't think I'll be able to wake up. Like life has no meaning. There's no purpose to anything.
That's now like a pure identity to money.
Yes. And especially when it's tied to that thing. You know, when you don't have other options. When it's like, this one must work. If it doesn't work, my whole world comes tumbling down. That's literally everything about what you do,
Yeah.
and even unconsciously about how you relate, even with your own person,
Yeah.
is based on that value of money. And I think that's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in your experience with the different people that you've talked to and different clients, what does money mean to people?
Secrets.
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 Okay, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, money is such a secret thing to a lot of people. And the reason why money is a secret to a lot of people, and even to myself, until I learned a healthier language of money, still learning, is because money is not talked about at home. And if it's talked about in a language that's punitive. Unanisumbua, huwezi tosheka na hiyo, like, but I did this for you yesterday. Or, which I was doing to my son, I didn't even realize it, restrictive. Here is a phone. I bought for you this phone. If it gets lost, jipange. And I'm not telling him how to make sure that this phone doesn't get lost. It's like I've sacrificed a lot. It's almost blood and tears, you know.
Yes.
I've given you, you see, I've bought for you a phone.
Yeah.
You're so lucky. How many of your ninis?
I have.
See, it's restrictive. And in family systems, we say that which is not discussed is transmitted. So if you don't discuss money, secrets is going to be transmitted in. And then what do we do about secrets? We protect them. We don't want to expose them. So then money conversations become such a shaky, we become overly anxious about it, and we become very protective. You're like, if you're in a relationship and your partner asks you, okay, so what do you think? What should we buy? It's like, don't touch. That's like such a raw wound.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a call to parents. Even though you're uncomfortable with money, please know your children know, if not more, possibly equally, what you know about money, because the internet is there. That's a good thing about growing up in the 90s. All of us were.
Yeah.
At least the millennial that I am.
On the older side of
the
millennials.
older side of, we were in the darkness. All of us we collectively suffered,
Yes.
you know. Here, children are bright. There's the internet. 16-year-olds are billionaires. Open up conversations about money, as awkward as it will be. I should say, a family where we don't talk, a lot of things are transpired into secrecy. And that secrecy is seen in our relationships. So that you present a certain front of who you want people to relate with, but the real person is behind here. And that's the language of shame, really. So a lot of money conversations are shameful conversations, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. I guess piggybacking off of that, is there a perfect amount of money for someone to make? Is there like a perfect amount to make that will give you equal, like emotional well-being, satisfaction, where you're not making too much and you're not addicted to it or chasing it too hard, and you're not suffering, and you're able to enjoy life, and your value system is based properly? Is there like a perfect amount of money?
I think that is unique. It's individual by individual. By all means, get a target for your life. Work backwards. Say, by the time I'm not retiring, I'm going to be working until I'm 95. But also it's because I love what I do. So say, by the time I'm like 60 or 70, I don't want to work. And this is the amount of money that I want to come into my account every other time out of pension. Work backwards. In terms of that, maybe that's the perfect figure that you want to live a quality of life when you're in your old age. Go ahead, do those plans, get the financial coaches here and there, do all those plans. But what you don't want to do is to attach that value with happiness. You don't want to say that the day I have $1 million in my account, that's the happiest day that I will be. Because what happens is that happiness becomes very elusive. And not only does it become elusive, something else happens. It means that if I am happy and I don't have that money, then I'm guilty-ridden of my happiness now. Because my brain is like, why are you happy and you don't have the money that you have? That's not a life well lived. So go ahead, do your financial planning, get that perfect amount of figure. No shame in that. But do not attach that with your emotional needs.
Okay. And how do you practice that? How do you practice happiness outside of whatever figures it is that you've said?
Contentment. And that too has to be learnt. Even contentment in lack. Now, I'm not saying don't be ambitious. No. Be ambitious, but the little that you have today, be grateful for that. Because it's in that gratefulness that it stewards a discipline that the next, if I'm content with 1,000, the next time I get 10,000, I know how to plan so that I make sure at least I have that 1,000. But if I'm not content with this 1,000, even the 10,000, I won't be content. That's a discipline that we have to learn. And gratitude is so powerful. In somewhere in the US, it's called Palo Alto. They did a study group, of 75 plus years. And they realized that, so there were two, there was the control group and there was the randomized group. And so the control group was given an exercise on gratitude every day. Okay, so the thing that they wanted to test here, that research word has wanted to test is, does gratitude have an effect on the slowing down of dementia? Right? So they did the brain scans and all of them were similar. The control group that practiced gratitude once a day showed reduction of the progression of dementia than the randomized group. So gratitude is what that will keep you every day content with what you have, but sharpen your ambition into, yes, I have this, I'm grateful I have this. But it doesn't mean that because I have this, so I can just sleep and chill and relax like this is the best. No, it's, I have this is what I'm going to do so that when I get 100 or 50K or whatever, I know this is how I'm going to plan it here and there. Yeah. So the everyday mindful practice is gratitude.
I mean, but that, again, ideally it sounds great, right? I'm assuming like gratitude is, gratitude list at the end of the day, what are you grateful for, etc. But if you, like we've talked about earlier, if you've lost a job, you've lost income earning opportunities, and things are hard, how do you find happiness in having to move houses? How do you find happiness in your kids having to change schools? How do you find happiness in not being able to afford basic needs? How do you find joy and happiness there?
So here we're talking about a duality, okay? We're talking about, first, that's a grief moment that has to be honored. There has to be sadness. We have to allow the sadness to exist when there's a loss of income. If I've lost income, and I have lost a job previously, if you've lost a job, you're going to cry about it. That's the reality. Maybe somebody's going to do something different about it, okay? We are not saying the happiness is going to replace the sadness. We're saying in the state of sadness, what are some of the things, even if it's minute, like, okay, I was able to sleep today. Or, okay, even though we are coming less than, at least we are eating a meal together. Or at least we have clothes on our backs. So we're not saying replace the loss with the feeling of happy. That's actually a shameful experience and you don't want that. We're saying, as we are grieving, look out for some of the things that are going well for you and you'll be so surprised that there are very many. I don't know if that's realistic enough.
No, I mean, yeah, I think that then makes sense, because I guess what you're saying is that the sadness will happen, it will exist, and it's not about trying to like erase it.
No.
Like it's happening, but as it's happening, to try and, it almost sounds like to some degree you have to build from scratch, like maybe not scratch, but like you have to start afresh almost. And not perceive your life with a previous lens that you had almost.
And even if you perceive it, because that's a human thing, we will always look back and, oh, those days were so good. Yes, they were. Grieve about it. But then the question is, the good that was in those days, what can we salvage? We still, even if you lose your job, and again, I'm not demeaning this. I have lost jobs, so I know how devastating it is. You still have the experience that you used in that job. No one has taken that away from you. What they have taken is the uncertainty of an income. So you still have the skill, and you possibly still have the network. What can we do with those? Because if we stay there and if we wallow, I think one of Murphy's law says that when things are generally left by themselves, they deteriorate. If we stay there and not do anything, the grief expounds. It becomes like a compounding effect because we haven't worked towards getting another job. We haven't worked towards calling somebody and saying, hey, I remember you mentioned, the CEO of this organization. Could you put in a word for me? We haven't worked towards telling our families, hey, I'm sorry, I can no longer pay back black tax. So we find that if we stay at that point where we've been injured, the problem becomes bigger and bigger. And we don't want that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How much does our value system, whatever value system one has, how much does that contribute to their experience of happiness?
Everything.
So what would be an ideal value system? Factoring in the fact that we've already said in one way or another, your value system is going to get corrupted and money is going to be a factor that plays in it one way or another. So what's an ideal value system?
Creation of your own value system. It's not only ideal, it's actually realistic. I think one of the things that our education system did was to paint life as a black and white. Life is 98% gray. So an ideal / practical value system is to actually say, okay, when I wake up in the morning, what do I want to feel? I want to feel content, or I want to feel upbeat. What do I need to do to feel upbeat? Do I need to put on a podcast immediately? Do I need to say a prayer? Do I need to recite scripture? What do I need to do? That's how you're creating an ideal and practical value system. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So it's picking a number of values.
Yes.
Up and including money, which inadvertently is there. And then doing specific things that allow you to feel this value thing that you feel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I should say possibly I was going to say let's normalize, and I'm like, but it's okay. In fact, it is prudent to learn outside. Don't feel the pressure of having to have all the answers internally. You don't.
Yeah. But even then, how many values can one have or should one have? And I want to actually relate this to, like, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was 2-3 weeks ago, there's this video that went viral on Twitter and on Instagram and TikTok, this Ashton Hall guy who wakes up at 3:50 a.m. he does press ups and then
I've seen the parodies.
Yeah, and then goes to the gym and then dips his head in water and then swims, and so by 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. he's already had like 2 meetings, or, and like he's making money. So I mean, so I'm wondering. So I mean, we have finite time. I have 24 hours, right? How many values can I pack in these 24 hours that I can truly achieve and fulfill, where I then don't feel like a failure at the end of the 24 hours because I've not been able to achieve all these things that I value, that I want to pursue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's a process of exploration and experience. I don't know how practical that is, in all honesty. Waking up at 3:50 and having, to be honest, I don't know how practical that is. But if it works for him, good for him, right? Majority of us are trying to better ourselves every other time, okay? In exploration and experiencing, you want to actually live out a value and say, does that match who I think I am, or does it not match who I am? For example, does it mean that if I go to the gym every day, I'm disciplined? Or does it mean discipline for me looks like going to bed at 9? Does discipline look like not scrolling, not doom scrolling? Or does discipline look like reading a book from cover to cover? It's quite, it's very subjective. It's not objective. As to the number of values that somebody has practically, even if I had 50 values, they'd boil down to 2 practically. And I want you to actually do that exercise. Go to tell you to give you 10.
Right.
I tell you can narrow down 10 values to 2 core primary values. And the reason is because human beings, we are both simple beings, but also extremely complex. So that if I take 5 values, you'll always come down to my 2 core values are faith and kindness. And that's how you operate. But you don't know if you don't try. You don't know if you don't experience. And then also, I know we know this, But what is posted on social media is actually not a reality.
Right.
It's not a reality. So that even when you're looking at the value of money, what does money mean to you? Most people will say freedom. But freedom from what? Like if I came and gave you freedom, but your mind has not conceptualized the value of freedom itself, you'll most probably misuse it. So we have to experience and explore our values before you actually say, okay, these are my core values. Leave them out. Experience how they make you feel. Experience the values with other people. Let other people tell you, okay, I liked you better when you're humorous, but I also understand there's some situations that you won't always be humorous.
Yeah.
That's how you're learning. Also, get external resources. Look for podcasts about identity. Learn about identity. Soak into it. Then create your own identity. Look for books. Look for movies. And that's part of exploration and experience.
Okay. There's two questions I want to ask. So let me do the first one. What happens when we don't meet our set value objective, right? So you've talked about, for example, like discipline, whatever discipline means. So if I say discipline for me means going to bed at 9 p.m., it means not scrolling on my phone, not doom scrolling, whatever the case is, and then I do it. What happens to me psychologically? Like, what are the things that I go through when I don't meet an expectation that I've set for myself with regard to a value that's important for me in my life?
So let's look at both. Let's look at what happens to you internally, emotionally, and psychologically, and what happens to you when you meet it. So what happens to you when you don't meet it? And this is really, really sad, but your brain starts to doubt yourself.
Subconsciously.
And that's why diets are difficult. Because, and maybe I want to use that example. It's like today I woke up and I said, I'm going to eat healthy.
I didn't.
Tomorrow when I wake up, and this is a function of the brain, it uses the past experiences to project the future expectations. So today I've woken up and said, I'm going to eat a salad and everything will be okay. And then I eat fries. If at that particular point, I don't acknowledge that I have let myself down, the brain takes that. And the next day you say you're going to eat healthy.
Fries.
So your brain starts to doubt yourself. And that's where quote unquote self-sabotage comes from. Which is like, I really want to do it, but I don't know what happens. I just find myself not doing it. So what you want to do is that when you don't meet your value, acknowledge that there is a loss. It's like, oh, I feel so disappointed with myself in a compassionate way. I really feel disappointed with myself that I didn't meet this value. But what have I learned? I have learned that maybe I'm not as strong as I think I am. Okay, what do I need to do to make me strong? Do I need an accountability partner? Do I need more information? Is this just not the time to go on a diet? And this is intentionality. So if you don't meet your value, unconsciously your brain, like, oh, we can't trust. And what starts to happen is shameful talk. So that you even shy away, even from connection on this thing that's happening. But what happens when you meet your value, or what happens when you learn from your value, your brain starts to learn that it can trust you. And so it gives you the motivation to push. Again, today I ate a salad. Tomorrow I'll wake up and be like, oh yeah, but yesterday I ate a salad. Maybe yesterday I went to the gym. Okay, I know today I'm going to go to the gym. So those two happen.
Is it the same, because you're talking about this value system, is it the same with money? Because we've agreed money is a value system for us.
Absolutely, 100%.
So, you'll have the beginning of the year and you say, I want to make, like my friend Justin here can say, I want to make 15 million this year or 20 million this year.
Which you will by then.
And I don't achieve that. Does my brain in relation to money in this context, does it operate in the exact same way?
Yes, and also no. Some, I think, okay, so for me, where I realized I was going wrong in my financial journey was not counting the cents. What are 200 bobs? The transaction fee, the nini. Or somebody calls you, can you send me 500? It's 500 plus 25. I learned if you take care of the cents, the thousands take care of them. Now I'm still learning, in all honesty. I won't say like now I'm still learning. Why have I brought that up? Your brain learns from simplicity before it encompasses complexity. So that if you want to make 15 million, it's going to start with, okay, today, what have you done with the 1,000? Because it's the same system it's going to use. It's not going to switch. It's not like an automatic new system that's going to come for you to make 15 million. So like if, a funny story, still on the same, we're buying some food sometime in town, and then me and my son, when he was buying, somebody told him, oh, by the way, you know, there's a 50% off on this ice cream. So normally the ice cream goes for 150. Now it's at 70 bob, 70 or 75, yeah. So he was given a voucher, and he was like, this is so exciting. We can get ice cream at 70 bob. Now I'm like, yeah, but that 70 bob you didn't factor in. And that's what we do, you know. You see something written sale and you're like, I'm saving 50 bob. No, you're spending 50 bob because you didn't have it. You're not saving anything. In a way to say, how you value the small, for sure, is how you're going to value the big. So even with money, how you value time, for example, is how you're going to value money. How you value respect is how you're still also going to value money. Because the brain, FYI, the brain is the most laziest organ in the body. The brain is meant to keep you safe, not necessarily happy. And so if it is used to spending 1,000, when you get 1,000,000, it's going to spend it. I promise you that, because it's using the same faculty. Yeah.
I mean, there's that, I don't know what movie or series it was, but there's a phrase where it says, how you do anything
how you do
is
anything.
how you do everything.
Yes.
Anyway, okay, so basically we've said, all right, the same way we broke down sort of that diet, not meeting your diet, and how the brain works there.
Yeah.
Even here, when I set the objective for my money or whatever I want to achieve, when I'm not able to achieve it, if I don't acknowledge it, I'll go through an internal shaming process where I'll shame myself, and my brain will then inadvertently almost put me down from trying to make that money again, or even trying to set that objective again. So essentially, it sends me down this unhealthy path to not even end up achieving this process. Whereas if I do achieve it, then it's like, you can make the next one, and you can make the next one. Okay, interesting.
And this guy does a lot of those scientific understanding behind that. It's called, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called Dr. Joe Dispenza.
I haven't.
Yeah, if you Google Joe Dispenza, he tells you how your thoughts are making you sick. Thoughts.
Okay. I'll look him up.
Yeah.
I'll look him up. We'll leave a link in the description box.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. And this is the element of freedom that you were talking about, right? Of where you're saying, if you haven't conceptualized it, if you haven't pictured it, if understood it, it really may not mean that much to you, even if it's offered. And while we were researching for the Love and Money event, I remember listening to now the guy who wrote the book, The Psychology of Money, and he was talking about how freedom as a context is very interesting. And he said that freedom is basically about the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it.
Do you know how scary that is to a human being?
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so he was saying that there are many people who may be employed and earning a lot of money, but technically are not free. Because you are beholden to someone else's order, and you have to do it. When basically when they tell you that you need to do a task or whatever the case is. So the question I wanted to ask is, are there then a vast majority of people who are sort of stuck in, whether it is employment, whether it is jobs, whether it is entrepreneurship, purely because of the amount of money they're earning to facilitate their lives, but are incredibly unhappy because of the fact that they are working in these jobs and aren't quote unquote free?
And all my corporate buddies say yes.
Yeah.
I think yes, and I will qualify the yes. Even around your circles, guys who are employed, and by the way, no shame in being employed, FYI. What happens on Sunday evening?
It's the Monday blues. Is it Sunday? It's Monday blues. Is it Monday blues, Sunday blues?
Yeah.
Is it Sunday blues? Anyway, I don't know the term, but how
come it's all these things that you're coming to deal with, yet you can't separate yourself from that work? And we're not saying you do, because you need the financial benefits that you have. But this makes me very sad, because most of the time we inherit the identity of financial freedom. Again, in my age, we were told, go to school.
Get a degree.
All our parents were number one, by the way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Go to school, get a degree, get employed, then live happily thereafter. And most people are actually living that narrative because that's all you have known. So possibly a challenge is, even whilst still employed, we're not asking anybody to leave their employment. How can you experience small freedoms in your everyday job that's causing you anxiety? It could be a 5-minute break that you go and read a favorite book, listen to music, do some push-ups, call a friend, laugh. So take those 5 minutes, if possible, every hour. This breaks the cycle of anxiety at the workplace. So I think, and unfortunately because of the reality of the world there is, I think a majority of people, as I was stuck in corporate because it paid my bills, I needed to pay for my son's school fees. And it was highly anxious, but I couldn't do anything about it because that was the only way I knew success looked like. So here also is redefining your own understanding of success. Still in the job, but you're successful because you have healthy relationships with your colleagues. Or every weekend, for me, my job gives me the success to be able to rest on weekends and switch off. It's your own definition of success. I don't think because you're stuck in a job that's bringing you a lot of anxiety and causing you some dysfunctionality, I don't think it's like a net loss altogether. I think there's still some good that you can revive even in that kind of a job.
So it sounds to me like you're saying you need to redefine for yourself what that job means for you and be intentional about pursuing whether it's happy moments or moments that will give you some level of peace as you pursue, as you stay in this job, because you need to stay there to be able to pay bills.
Yes. And there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no shame in that. I think also majority of us, I think we have I think we have another person's definition of let's say, for example, freedom. By the way, freedom is a very scary thing for an individual. The reason why freedom, and that's the reason why also why we get into cults or we elect the leaders that we do know really, it's because if I give you total, absolute freedom, what I'm telling you is you're totally, absolutely responsible for all the consequences that come with the freedom. Not many of us can be able to stomach that. So find your value of freedom. It doesn't necessarily have to be free flying the whole world. That's scary. Maybe freedom means every day I'm able to do homework with my children. That's my freedom. Or freedom means I'm able to go and take a loan from the bank. That's my... Redefine your own freedom. It doesn't necessarily have to be an abstract definition of freedom, because that's possibly not your definition. Yeah.
So I guess from what you're saying, the fear of being 100% responsible is something that many people are not willing to or able to come to terms with.
Yes.
So even the term, because I'm thinking about the term financial freedom. So the thought there is, if I'm trying to apply the same logic, it's the fear of being 100% in control of your finances and having no one else to potentially blame.
Yes.
Is a fear is a fear in and of itself.
And it's risky as well. If I am 100% responsible for me waking up in the morning, what we eat, anything that goes wrong is my fault.
Okay.
And that's scary. But we can't live avoiding that. What then can you do to reduce the anxiety is to incorporate the space of failure. That even though I said I wanted 100% freedom,
maybe it's not. It's like 50%.
Yeah, I think I want 50% because there's a loss to that. And let me tell you a real loss. Actually, this is now for women. We want those high positions, and it's great that we should go out and get them. But what I have encountered again and again and again, even in my corporate training, is the fear of being alone at the top. It's like
Collins are stunned.
I'm alone. And because based on how you are brought up, you're not supposed to show off. So that if I have all this money and I am a woman and I am alone, what does that mean? It's a very fearful place to be. And so unconsciously we are saying, yes, I want that position. Yes, I want to be in the C-suite. But, consciously we're saying that. But unconsciously, if you haven't truly investigated what is the cost of this C-suite and accepted the cost of it being isolation, there's nothing wrong with isolation, being misunderstood, being by yourself and being assumed, if you haven't accepted that as a cost, that is what will unconsciously stop you from growing into that was my story in corporate. My last job was head of marketing regional. I was in charge of 4 countries. I just couldn't get over into the marketing director because my perception then, I was young. My perception then was, those women really feel like they don't want to be associated like those. It stunted my growth. It's now that I know, do I regret it?
It inadvertently stunted your growth.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that until much later.
So you're saying if you had been conscious about it and been open to understanding what it means to be at the director level and taking those into consideration, it would have allowed you to...
I'd been sitting on 10 boards by now.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to unpack this. So what I'm hearing you say, I guess, is that even these things that we say we want to achieve, whether it's financial freedom or whatever it is, we can be our own worst enemies in achieving the money goals or career goals or whatever goals that we want to achieve if we haven't fully comprehended what it means to get there.
Yeah.
Because subconsciously your brain will stop you from going there because it knows what you will sacrifice.
Because it's unfamiliar.
Yeah.
It's unfamiliar.
And so it's like, no, I don't really want to go there.
No. So you will work and work and work.
And you'll say you want to.
And you want to, but it's just, have you had conversation with friends just like, but I do this and I do this and I do, but just, kuna kitu tu. Yeah. It's very unconscious. Familiarity is so addictive. Familiarity is what that keeps us functional in a dysfunctional space. Because it's familiar. Because chaos are predictable. If I'm working for a boss who I know every Monday they're angry, why do I want to switch jobs? So you're telling me to switch jobs so that I can learn another boss's mood swings on them. It's too much. Better the devil I know.
That yeah. So how do you remove that barrier? How do you move from that to, like, for you, what should you have done that would have allowed you to then get to the direct level?
To be honest, and I'm not saying this because I'm a therapist, I just wish I'd gone for therapy earlier. Because it's when I dealt with my trauma, I understood how my trauma kept me safe, even at the workplace.
Can you give me a practical example of that? The guys here who all of a sudden are listening very keenly. Anyway,
okay. A practical example is, so I didn't grow up with my mom. My mom left when I was 2 years. So my relationship with female authority figures was always strained. So a boss who was a female was always a bad person to me. Did I have nasty bosses as females? Yes, I did. And I will not shy off in saying that. But my perception, even to the kind ones, was from a negative, right? So what the brain did was to create an association with the role and the person. Marketing directors, GMs who are females are bad people. I don't want to be that bad person. So I'm not going to go for those positions. Because there's an association created of role and person, and that's trauma. It was me experiencing my trauma at the workplace. If I'd gone for therapy sooner, that would have been deciphered. It should have been, no, what you're doing is to actually project that the rejection of your mother, no, she's not your mother. It's your brain telling you, it's protecting you. Remember, your brain's supposed to keep you safe, not necessarily happy. So if I'd gone for therapy, that would have been deciphered.
But so you're saying, but then, like, in the reality of it, you would express that you do want to get to the higher levels.
I was ambitious.
But you never,
no.
you never,
No.
you never. So it was like speaking from two sides of your mouth.
Do you know how bad it was?
Yeah.
I got a role in Safaricom in 2012. I didn't pick up the role because the boss was a woman. She's like, I'm not going to be her. Trauma, my friend, trauma.
Wow. Okay.
The value of money is not separate from your traumatic experiences. It's part of that. And if you don't work on your unconscious, if you don't work on your subconscious, you're going to project these things in literally every place that they are not supposed to be there. Because your brain's supposed to keep you safe.
Yeah.
If it sees a threat or a perceived threat, even if it's a perceived threat, it's like, no, don't go there. We are keeping you here. So people will say, I want financial freedom. But when you come down to the wire, there's nothing that's happening. There's no step being taken. It's not that this person doesn't want to not take any step. It's that they're incapable of, they don't have the ability to. Because there's something holding them back. And it's a familiarity of how you grew up, the narrative that you got, even of money. Some people are afraid of getting too much money because they'll be the ones who are standing out from their family. Everyone will come to them. The entire family will come to them for solutions. So that I don't want you to come to me for solutions. I'm not going to get the money. Tutaka see what hapa.
That's incredible. And you're saying that like a lot of this can happen subconsciously. Like you're
Yes.
not. So I can be sitting here for 2-3 years and I'm saying, I want more money. I want more money. I want more money. But subconsciously, my brain is stopping me from pursuing more money, from actively pursuing it.
And how to know that? When you say you want these things, what do you feel? Is there anxiety? Is there fear? And what do you do about it? Do you quickly shelve it? It's like, in fact, we have a saying in psychology, we say, before you heal somebody, ask them if they're willing to give up that God made them sick. Because if I heal you and you keep going back to the well that's giving you dirty water, it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
So when you think about, oh yeah, I want financial freedom, and then you think about the work that you want to do, what do you feel?
Probably anxiety.
Investigate that anxiety. How comes? Because that anxiety is historical. You haven't started the work. That's what's holding you back.
Collins, you've had. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Okay. I guess we're moving on. As I mentioned, like there's different things we want to cover. There's so many things we could cover, but I'm trying to get through as much as I can through our limited time. Please do feel free to reach out to Nyambura. Of course, her contacts and everything will be in the description box. Is love language, is gifting as a love language primarily about money?
It's yes and no. You need money to buy the gifts.
Yes.
Right? So that part, yes. No, because once again, if gifting was how I learned that I am accepted, that's my love language. For example, in the West, not here, when parents are busy, they will gift their children a lot of gifts, like gadgets.
Overcompensation or whatever. Right?
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. They're doing the best that they can. No shame in that. So this child will grow up knowing, if I've done something great, I need to be given a gift. So it's both yes and no. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I thought there'd be more of a debate there, but it's fair. I guess it is yes and no.
it's yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay.
And by the way, you can gift, and that doesn't necessarily have to be your love language.
Yeah.
Like I like gifting people, but please don't gift me. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you who's gifting the love language, you who's gifting, that's not your primary love language.
Yeah.
It's just something that you learned. If I do, I get accepted.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The next thing I want to talk about is money as an attraction, right? Or an attractive or attraction point, right? Ultimately, what is it that makes people with money more attractive or draw people towards them?
Because it's soft life.
Yeah.
No, really.
Simple as that.
It's aspirational. And so here, let's take it slowly, okay? If I have more money and I'm able to, for example, drive a Bentley, let's even say that, right? When you and I are driving in that Bentley, people are going to look. That makes you feel nice. It makes you feel achieved. That's what I mean by aspirational. Because somewhere we learned that human adoration is close to acceptance. Somewhere we learned that. So that the more money you have, the more people are kind of adoring you, because that's what human beings do. And that makes you feel good. Because it means you've done something, and that something is a witness to your existence. That's what it is.
I have a question to ask there on sort of a contrarian point.
Yeah.
Where there are these, and I really don't want to like stereotype, but let me use my father-in-law. So, for example, my father-in-law has told me many times he worked in South Africa at some point in time for his life, and he said he bought a Mercedes E200 from the showroom.
Yo.
And he said he bought it from the showroom partly because my mother-in-law said that she had a dream of him driving a Mercedes or something like that. But he said he bought a showroom car. But when we talk about it now, many times he says if he goes back in time, he couldn't be bothered to buy a showroom. Right now, he drives what people would relate to as a very basic car. And he says he couldn't care less about how people perceive him based on what he's driving or what he's wearing or what he's showing up in.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what is it that kind of persona psychologically has that a person who potentially is driving a Bentley and is seeking or gets adoration from the Bentley and the big house and the etc. Like what are the two different makeup psychologically of these two people that one can have a lot of money and not be bothered by what they're wearing? They talk about Kikuyu millionaires who have real estate, and like you'd see the person and you could not imagine this is the individual of money vis-a-vis the expression and adoration that these are the kind of persona sort of seeks.
I think it's the value of identity. It's in this Kikuyu who has all that money, either knowing or unknowingly knowing that money is not a direct extension of him. Okay, it's a fallacy to think that money doesn't add value to your identity. It does. Problem here is we don't want money to be the fuel of your identity. We don't want it to be the foundation of your identity, because what that means is that when there's a lack of money, then there's no identity, and that's a crisis. Okay, so this Kikuyu who has all that money possibly knows that, okay, that money is separate from who I am. This is who I am. And maybe this other person has embodied the whole aspect of, if people admire me, if people see me, if people worship me, then it means I have significance and my existence is important. This lady, she's called Dr. Ramani, says that one of the biggest indicators of childhood trauma is when you nudge at somebody and tell them, do you see me? I'm a good person. That's one of the biggest indicators of childhood trauma. And when we are loaded with money and we want everybody to see that we are loaded with money and we want them to affirm our existence based on the loading of money, we are reliving something in our childhood at a point where we felt helpless, and now we are feeling quite powerful and everybody can see that we are powerful. Yeah.
Okay. And so when you're talking about the identity, so is this where, earlier we talked about the different value systems, that value points that you can take to help you. So is that where this comes in, where this Kikuyu gentleman who has figured out what his value system is, and money is just one of the many.
Yeah.
And so for him, essentially he has a healthy value system.
Yes.
Okay.
Might also be detachment.
Okay. Oh, it might just be completely detached.
Completely. Yeah.
Okay. And is that healthy or unhealthy, the detachment?
I would say in psychology we use the word maladaptive. It's maladaptive because it's keeping you from experiencing life to its fullest in that present moment. That's what I mean by maladaptive. But I have come to see that sometimes unraveling something like that, depending on where somebody is in their age, is actually more harm than good. There's a point where maybe even this old gentleman, he's a millionaire, amefika, like him, he's okay. You know, he's made peace with the dysfunctionality. He's learned how to deal with the trauma that he went through, and he's found ways to become functional, even in the dysfunctionality. Sometimes you look at these things, you're like, okay, what's the use of unraveling? It's because it's not causing him distress. It's actually fueling a kind of a life. So he's able to provide for his children. And so why are we unraveling these things?
Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is, especially because you talked about the detachment, is I'm wondering about money habits, spending habits, vis-a-vis people's value to money.
Yeah.
So, people who, I guess we have the spendthrifts and the misers and everything.
Yeah.
Does it mean that a spendthrift values money less than a miser, for example?
Not necessarily. Both can be coming from a point of trauma. So a spendthrift and a miser, right? So they can be coming from, which is very unique if it ever happens, from the same point of trauma. So let's start with the spendthrift. There's such a lack in wherever they're coming from, either in their upbringing, that whatever they get, they spend immediately, trying to compensate for the lack. And the miser equally can be coming from such a point of lack that whatever they get, they hold on to it because they don't know the next lack will come from. So they could literally be coming from the same point.
But technically speaking, they could value money in the absolute same way.
It's just how they respond to money is differently. Because both of them are actually coming from a part of, sorry to use this word, I don't like it. It's quite judgmental, scarcity mentality. So that in me who's a spendthrift, I'm going to spend it because I don't know when it's going to come. Yeah. And me who's a miser, I'm going to hold on to it because that's a scarcity mentality that we're coming from. It's the same thing, but our behaviors are different.
Is there, again, I don't technically use this word, but is the treatment of both of those conditions the same?
The intervention?
Yes.
Thematically, it's the same in terms of, so with trauma, you don't heal trauma. You heal the body's response to trauma.
Okay.
Because healing trauma means undoing the trauma, which is impossible.
Okay.
We have to go back to we don't have that power.
Right.
So when in trauma intervention, you heal the body's response to trauma. So when you see money and you're a spendthrift, what emotions are invoked? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And to change the association of that. That's trauma interventions. Part of it is what we call emotional regulation, allowing the body to feel whatever it's feeling. It doesn't mean that you're going to go back to what you experienced. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense. And in fact, what I wanted to ask you then is for people who offer financial advice, right? Is it then a shortcoming if you don't have a therapeutic evaluation element to it? And what I mean by that is, so if I have certain money habits and I go and I meet a financial advisor and they just tell me, hey, so based on the personality, because they always give these tests to try and figure out where you are on the scale. Yeah. And that can be as a result of whatever traumatic experience I've gone through, right? So then you decide that I am a low risk person or high risk, whatever the case is. Yeah. And you subscribe a financial plan that isn't furthered by the trauma that I have with regard to money. Yeah. And so even if I bring in like a partner or relationship element, is we can agree to something with my partner, right, but I am unable to follow through on the financial plan we've agreed upon because of whatever trauma it is that I have. And the perception then would be that I am a poor money manager or I have a poor discipline or whatever the case is. So essentially I'm asking if there's an oversimplification by the financial industry on the financial solutions that they're offering to us without taking into consideration our psychology of money as we're getting into the process.
I think there's a space for that. And this is what I mean. When you're given that plan, even though at some point it will get you stuck, you're already teaching your brain something it didn't know, right? And even implementing 10 or 15% of that plan you're already building confidence in terms of learning things that you didn't know. So in that space, there's that regard, yes, the plan that they are giving, there's a space for that. Perhaps if it's not being incorporated, is to explore what is the intersectionality between trauma and money spending or lack of money spending behavior. What are the values that this person has and where are these values inherited from? Maybe that's not the in-depth work that they need to do. Personality tests are great. The only thing the personality tests do not go into in-depth is the body healing, from the experience, from the relationship with trauma. Personality tests will tell you who you are now, right? Of course, they incorporate how you've grown, but they don't tell you what to do in terms of where you're getting stuck. So possibly with the plans that are in place, I guess they're quite prudent for financial advisors. If they could incorporate, I don't know what it is, either some level of assessment on trauma and have specialists, like if we can even collaborate to help the person treat the trauma, because trauma affects everything. We described trauma is best understood with two is the event and the emotional experience. Okay, so the trauma is not the event. Trauma is the emotional experience after the event. Right? And it's what that we keep happening over and over again. So that even when I see money, how am I responding to that money? And if I haven't done any trauma interventions, we call them treatments, we call them interventions. If I haven't done any interventions that my trauma has brought me, I'm going to respond as if I'm experiencing that event again. Okay. Yeah.
All right, I think that makes sense. Next thing is money as a source of jealousy, right? Again, ultimately, what's the thing that makes us jealous of people with money? What's the source of envy, so to speak? What is the thing that we're trying to cure or sort out? Yeah.
You remember the aspiration?
Yes.
So now this is the opposite of aspiration. Why can't I be that person?
Okay.
It possibly might be learned. Remember, like number ones, all the attention,
yes.
all the recognition, all the acceptance, it makes you feel less than. And so if I have more money, then I am more than.
Yes.
And I am above
the rest.
Yeah. So right. I am really, really better than you. In shame, because I do my focus is on trauma, grief, and shame. In shame, we call that the language of shame. Because shame does two things to a human being. Shame dehumanizes so that you're less than a human, or shame, it superhumanizes so that you're more than a human. You feel the need to be more than a human being, but you're just a human. Fun fact, that's where a lot of narcissistic personality disorders come about. It's the superhumanization. So the whole aspect of jealousy over money is, why can't I be that person?
Okay. Yeah. And it's, why can't I be that person? Because the way that I view myself based off on my experiences, I am less than at the moment because I am not that person.
And you've been taught that.
Yeah. And so rather than from the aspirational point of view of, if I could meet this person, they can open up doors to me.
To be like them.
It's now, I don't like this person because of their existence. Yes. I am less than.
Yeah. They remind me of what I am not at this particular time.
And the intervention process is, from I guess what you said, is it similar in terms of just the awareness and then sort of working through with someone?
Whenever you find that there's a behavior, the behavior is meeting an emotional need.
Okay.
So it's to actually understand what emotional need is this. To deeply explore what's the purpose of this emotional need. Is it yours, or did you inherit it?
Okay.
Is it tied to a belief system? Is it not tied to a belief system? And then to teach the client how to start meeting their own emotional needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want to enter, I guess, the last segment of our conversation. And with this, I'm going to paint with a very wide brush. And I'm looking at things literally from a Kenyan, or maybe even to a large extent, African perspective, right? And so the first thing that I want to ask, from a psychological point of view, purely psychological, what does having a quote unquote weaker currency do for citizens' psyche, like, like, for example, the Kenya shilling against the dollar? Do we inadvertently then begin to feel less than as a result of all the things that we are told about our shilling being weak and whatever the case is? Do we subconsciously just know that we are less than Americans because our shilling is worth less?
100%. Let's say there's another barrack close to you, okay? I give that barrack an iPhone 16, okay? And then I give you an iPhone 13. What will you feel?
I guess it's just like, why does he, why does he have the 16 and I have the 13? Mine's not as good. Mine's not as powerful, whatever the case is. Camera's not as good, all those things. Yeah.
And that's absolutely it. The fact that our currency is less than, if I go to America with $1, I have to work harder at knowing where to spend this $1 versus an American who's already used to knowing the value of $1 is zero. Me, I'm going to try and squeeze and check, can I get milk? Can I? Then they're just like, no, I easily have 100, which can income. So yeah, collectively, yes. And I guess going back into history, because I think the dollar was established in the, is it the 19th?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah.
It was, I know the dollar was established during the Second World War. And it was literally aimed at increasing the supremacy of the US then, because they won the World War with Japan. I mean, unfairly so, unfortunately.
Right.
But I know that, and then it was tied into, I think, some reservoirs, and it became the leading currency in terms of exchange of oil and all that stuff. And this is in the 1934s, if not even earlier. Actually, I think it's 1980s. 1918, 1914, that time. The whole idea of establishing the dollar is to reign supremely above other currencies, and especially in the third world currency. I mean, definitely, if somebody has 100, if somebody has Kenya shillings here and somebody who has dollars here, this one who has dollars has more exposure, right? It will make this one feel more inferior. It's just the way it is.
How would we, because I guess it's the reality of the economies and just the way they exist. But how does a society potentially get over that? Because if we subconsciously are feeling, whether we are aware of it or not, we know that we are couldn't go less than. How does a society get over that?
I think
if
it's
possible.
It's to increase the value of products and services locally, so that we are able to price them at a world class. So if we are able to produce quality services that's world class, and if you're able to produce quality products that are world class, I'm going to price you at the same value as the dollar.
Okay. So I get that from the economic perspective. What I want to understand is from a psychological perspective. You know how even when we're talking about individuals, we talked about having different things that sum up your value system, and money is just one of those things. And so if money is terrible or it's not working out, you still have these other things that allow you to feel valuable. So I'm wondering from a Kenyan perspective, like if we're relating to each other against a US or any other currency that is higher than ours, what are the things that psychologically we ought to do to not make us feel completely invaluable or completely less than because our currency is below theirs?
And I think this will be debatable. It's acceptance that these systems already exist. And maybe, again, this might be debatable, but it's to evaluate what is within my control. Can I change the world systems individually? Can I go and say, I'm producing goods that are even above the dollar, and subsequently I think you need to bring the dollar value of... No. Is to actually check with what is within my control at this particular time. I have to accept that this is how the world works. Now, acceptance does not mean resignation. It's like acceptance means acknowledgement. Is that if I am going to the US, I will expect to feel less than somebody who's in the US. That's acceptance. That's acknowledging. But if you go with, I need to be treated fairly, That's so idealistic, but it will literally never happen. Might not happen. So acceptance is in knowing these are the systems, this is how they are, but this is what I can do in terms of knowing that this is the value that I have, so that even if I have the opportunity to present alongside other Americans, this is what I bring to the table that's sometimes even more valuable than what they offer. That is what you can control as an individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two last themes I want us to explore. Second last one is so assume maybe let me ask this question first. What does it do for a society or a country, again, psychologically speaking, to live in a space where you pay your taxes and you see so much corruption, you see funds being misused, whatever the case is, you see those, you become desensitized to 5 billion and 2 billion and all those figures. What does it do for a society psychologically in relation to money?
Apart from increased anxiety, it's very practical to see people plummet into depression. Because when taxes are paid and unfortunately funds are misappropriated, you feel wasted. That's the reality. When I feel wasted, I feel helpless. And if I feel helpless, I don't want to do anything, because anyway, I'm just going to work and then it's going to be taken away and then it's going to be misappropriated. So collectively as a society, we become very angry. I don't know if you drive, but if you've noticed, maybe I've noticed because I'm emotionally sensitive, there's a lot of road rage. Like Kitambo, there was some level of courtesy. Now, I never, because I'm like, I don't know who's in that car. I don't know what they are going through. We are collectively quite frustrated and very angry. And that's why most of us drown in humor. I mean, Kenyans are funny. They will create memes because when you laugh about it, it makes you feel lighter. It doesn't necessarily take away the problem that you're going through, but when you laugh about it, you feel lighter. So collectively, we become stressed. There's increased levels of anxiety, and we become depressed, unfortunately. And that's really, really a sad state to be. And many people lose hope. In 2024, there was an increase, believe it or not, of male aged between the ages of 35 and 45. There was a 35% increase in suicidality.
35%.
35% last year. And the leading factor, financial constraints. That's what happens to a society when the economically these things is going on. We lose lives, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah,
That's
it
tough.
is.
If the government, if whether it's the revenue collection system or whatever the case is, was to try and address this problem. So, for example, one of the things that they do say is that only, a fraction of the people who are supposed to be paying their taxes pay their taxes, not even everyone's paying their taxes. If you were to look at it from a psychological perspective and say this is a psychological trauma that Kenyans are experiencing because of what they've experienced, because of the corruption and of those things, how would you handle it as a psychologist? Like, how would the government treat Kenyans to get to a point where people would be more open to paying taxes, that people would then, even in terms of seeking better leadership or any of those things, like how would that be treated, so to speak?
You know what, and maybe I'm saying this because I'm in the mental health space. I would advocate for the government to make mental health services more accessible, because whether we like it or not, mental health is associated with financial, right? And if you have places where general people can go and talk about the frustrations that they are going through and it's accessible for them, you know what that would do to the government? It would actually win trust for the government because the people would feel cared for. And hopefully streamlining these spending habits that we're seeing left, right, and center. But I think the quickest win would be open up centers where people can actually just go air out their frustrations in a professional way and have people equipped with mental health skills and financial literacy so that they can know why we need to pay for taxes. And hopefully the government can even be open into how this tax is being spent. That would be the quickest way to win trust to a lot of people.
Yeah. And I mean, even piggybacking off that, maybe I should have even asked this beforehand. I mean, the level of corruption that we see in our country, right? How much of it is genuinely, I don't want to call it a mental illness, but driven from these traumatic experiences that individuals in positions of power have, that they have this insatiable appetite for just more and more and more and more and more money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I want to see if it is a book or a journal. It's an academic literature that highlights Adolf Hitler's life, you know. It is said either his stepfather or father, I'm not really clear, he was a Jew, right? Meted a lot on Hitler and his brothers. And you can see the effect of the trauma that brought
He then had thereafter.
he actually had thereafter. Even our leaders, even they need to go for therapy, to be honest. Because some of these things that we want to acquire more and more, that's an insatiable thing that happens when we come from lack. My family of origin, I mean, I grew up in Githurai. We didn't have much, right? The ambition that I had when I was in corporate, because I was very trauma-driven, was coming from the lack. It's like there's no day I'm going to make sure, there's no day that will get me without money in the bank. You know, it's a great thing aspirationally to do, but it's such a life-breaking thing, you know, because you're looking at the goal and you're thinking, when I have this is who I need to be. And even they had to come from functions in heavily dysfunctional homes. And how do you learn how to undo that is to actually incorporate that trauma, accept that it happened, and then gain skills to help you become a better person, to help you become a better leader.
Yeah.
You know, trauma really affects us in more ways than most of us know.
Yeah.
There's nobody who's not affected by trauma. But the fact that what happened to me was never my choice, how I respond to what happened to me, that is what is my choice.
Because, I mean, if I'm to sum up some of the stuff that I've heard from what you've said today, is so basically this individual who's in a position of power, who has had a traumatic event inspire or dictate his life with regard to money moving forward, up until this intervention for that trauma, every time he will be in a situation where he has the ability to take money, he will take it.
Yes.
Up until his intervention to change that, he will take it 100 times out of 100 times. Okay. I mean, I think it's really unfortunate. And by the way, maybe just to qualify this, I do want to qualify this by saying I am in no way trying to sanitize or make simple or complex of people who are corrupt and people who steal money that belongs to the Kenyan
Absolutely.
people. In no way. I'm not saying that it's that there should be, there wasn't like sympathy or whatever. No,
Right.
it's a no. Like ethically, it's a no. It just should not happen.
And to that, we say behavior is explained, not excused.
Yes. Fantastic. I think that gives a fantastic explanation. So I am in no way trying to like give anyone a free pass and saying, oh no, people need trauma, they need to go for therapy so they can stop being corrupt. No. Corruption should be a non-starter.
Completely.
I'm just looking at it from the perspective of, I mean, everyone who comes in says, I'm going to run a no corruption, zero tolerance, but it keeps happening. And I mean, from what I've understood, the little I've understood from our conversation today is that it's a lot more complex than just saying no.
Yeah.
There's the behavioral elements that go into it. And if there's no intervention that happens, behavior will not be changed.
No.
Yeah. I just want to qualify that for the people who will come for me on Twitter and the likes. Okay, so the final thing that I want to finish with is a bit of a somber sort of moment, but truth in that we are, as a country, we're coming back to the finance bill. We're going back to the June 25th anniversary, which is right about the corner. I think when this episode comes out, it'll be maybe 2 to 3 weeks to the time. Just based on, because it was a traumatic event for, I think, Kenya as a country. A lot of individuals, a lot of people had more impact or had a lot more trauma than others.
Yeah.
There's just, I think, as we're shooting this, the Blood Parliament documentary has just been released. And so I'm wondering, as a like from a trauma perspective, because I know this as well. I think my mom shared this to me when she lost her mom, and she was telling me, when you get to the anniversary of traumatic events, something just happens to you, and you just have to be sort of conscious about where you're at, what you're feeling, and what's going on. So I'm wondering, as Kenya as a country, as we're coming to this anniversary, psychologically speaking, like what are the things that we should expect? What are the things that would be going on?
Yeah, it's borrowed. That the concept is understood from a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is better understood as, you see, your brain is 95% cholesterol. That's why supu ya kichwa is so delicious. It's just fat, right? So your brain does not have the flesh, the faculties to feel. The brain processes, doesn't feel, right? It feels pain, headaches and all that stuff. But your body is what is your emotions, your emotional experiences are stored in the body. Okay? Now, trauma is stored in two ways. It's stored as the image and it's stored as the emotion, right? So what happens is that because the emotions are stored as senses, that's why if you're in a traumatic, Lord forbid, like if you're in a car accident, you're going to smell the blood. You're going to feel like your senses are highly heightened. All those are stored in the body. So that at this point, we might be heightened in terms of fear. And you don't know where the fear is coming from. There might be heightened anxiety. During that time, when there were a lot of demonstrations, I was doing what we call an externship training for therapists. And I remember seeing so many cops around. And till to date, when I see a cop, my mind goes back then because I was so highly anxious, And these are the things that you're going to experience, especially emotionally. So just be ready to, maybe even you're going to be more irritable. You're going to be more agitated. You're going to cry out of nothing. You'll just be more easily angered during this time because collectively as a country, we suffered this kind of traumas. Yeah.
And so do you think as well, in addition to that, there'll just be maybe a bit more anxiety around
Absolutely.
this finance bill being read than the previous one?
There will be anxiety around it.
That, for me, wraps up all the questions that I had. I think I've explored all the different themes I wanted to explore about money and the psychology of it in our context.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Do you have one last thing you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to say that get your mental health, take care of your mental health, because it's your mental health that is going to relate with the money that you want to either achieve or have already achieved. Right. And so if you have a healthy mental health, your relationship with money is definitely going to be healthy.
Yeah.
And the inverse is equally true. So go for therapy and go to professional therapy. And by the way, I must say, when you're going to choose a therapist, ask to see their credentials. I always tell my clients, you want to see my certificates? Here they are. Because you need to make sure that you're dealing with a professional. Because if you're not dealing with a professional, they'll really mess you up. And they'll also mess your relationship with money. Sasa, you don't want to be in that. Yeah. But thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation. Definitely learned a lot.
Yeah.
Definitely learned a lot. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And as for you guys, thank you again for listening to our episode. We will see you guys next week, next Friday, in the next episode of Financially Incorrect.